Welcome to the newest episode of the Giants Huddle podcast. My name is John Schmeelk. Today's guest, one of the best offensive line scouts around, Brandon Thorn. But first, a reminder, you can find the Giants Huddle podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms on the Giants mobile app and at giants.com/podcast. And if you're into the NFL draft, check out our new podcast called Draft Season. I host it with Tony Pauline and Eric Crocker, and we do a lot of hardcore draft stuff as well. Now we welcome our guest. He is Brandon Thorn, author of the Trench Warfare newsletter. One of the reasons I wore my salute to service today, someone with the Trench Warfare newsletter had to go salute to service. Offensive line scope for Bleacher Report, analyst for Establish the Run, and he also works for Duke Manyweather out there with the OL Masterminds folks. Right, Brandon?
Yes, sir. Yep. Appreciate you having me, man. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, me too. It should be a lot of fun. Giant fans are rightfully obsessed with the offensive line, given it's been a problem since 2013. Long time. And they're trying to figure out how to solve the problem. So draft will be a big avenue to that. But first comes free agency. And as you know, the Giants do not have a ton of money available under the salary cap to go shopping for the guys at the top of the market. So we're coming to you to try to find who are some of the guys mid and low tier that are affordable that the Giants might target that can slide in and be a good, solid, average, serviceable NFL starter as they try to build the foundation of their line with younger players.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of options, actually, especially on the interior. Tackle is obviously much more difficult because it's kind of a harder position to play, frankly, requires more athletic ability. And, the bigger you get, the less athletic you get. There's just less of those, right? The demand's always going to outweigh the supply. But in terms of interior guys, I think, we'll start with guard, and there's a couple that jump out to me specifically on the right side. Probably my favorite, like mid-tier kind of guy is Austin Corbett. So, from the Rams the last couple of years, he really just, started off in Cleveland and, kind of flamed out there pretty quickly and then went to LA and really reclaimed his career. 2020, I thought he was one of the 10 or 12 best right guards in football. Last year took a little bit more of a dip, specifically in pass protection with his technique, some of those type of things. But I think as a run blocker, he has a very high floor. I think he's going to be an above average run blocker for you, in pretty much any scheme, a little bit slanted more towards the zone scheme based on his experience, but he could kind of do both because he's very strong. So play strength is kind of one of his calling cards as a player that he leans on, not only in the run game, but also anchoring. So if you just last year, if you watch his game against the Bucs and what he did against Sue, I thought he, kind of got after Sue a little bit last year. And then 2020, like I said, he was very good. So he's kind of one of my favorite guys, pretty young still as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of right guard, that's a guy that I like quite a bit. And if you want to get like a left guard, Roger Saffold just got released today. Definitely older, stopgap kind of guy. Not what he has been in the prior few years before last year. You could see some of that wear and tear kind of, getting to him. So, he's more of like a short-term fix rather than longer like Corbett would be. But he's a guy who's still one of the bigger, more powerful guards in the league who could do some things for you as a run blocker, but pass pro is going to be pretty high variance with him. So, that's an option. I mean, I like the right side guys a little bit better. Laken Tomlinson would be another mid-tier left guard, that you're looking at who, has a lot of experience in his zone scheme. Again, kind of more of a more power oriented type of player. A little bit more high variance and pass protection, in terms of technique and things like that. But another guy who got his career resurrected in the right situation, kind of like Corbett, Tomlinson started in Detroit, went to the 49ers and became, a solid player. So those are probably my top like mid-tier guys. There's a bunch of other ones though, that are more like short-term stopgap kind of guys. I mean, I think Ode Obushi, from the Chargers, I'm really interested in him. He had a very good 2020 with the Lions. Last year tore his ACL after 4 games, I believe, but was very good in the 4 games as well. I think you're looking at a middle of the pack starter there, right guard. So that's another guy who's flying under the radar. I think, I would imagine the Chargers would want him back, but that's another one. AJ Cann is another potential free agent right guard who has had some really good moments over his career, better run blocker than pass protector, but definitely a guy that I could see being, kind of like a mediocre, solid kind of starter, so guys you can, potentially win with as maybe your fourth and fifth best offensive lineman, maybe third best if you're maybe like a lower tier offensive line. But those are some guards. And then center, my favorite mid-tier center is Ben Jones. He's been underrated for a long, long time, half a dozen years or so that I've been watching him. Competitive toughness and mental processing are certainly there in spades with him. He's a guy that you bring in to kind of lead your offensive line room. If you have a young offensive line, he could do that. He can handle everything pre-snap for you, take pressure off the quarterback. Former undrafted free agent. I love those kind of guys. He's a really good run blocker as well. So Ben Jones would be my favorite center guy he might be like the second or third best center on the market, but he's one of my favorite guys that I think you can get for, reasonable price.
Yeah, it seems like the center market is a little bit bare this year. There's not a ton out there in free agency.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now and not a whole lot. I mean, obviously you have Jensen at the top, and then after that it's, Ben Jones. I think Matt Paradis is another guy. I mean, those three looking at this list are kind of, well, Jensen's in his own tier, and
Sure.
then like tier 2 would be Paradis, Jones, maybe Brian Allen you can throw in there, Bozeman, maybe, but I like Paradis and Jones more. It's just they're older. So, with Bozeman, you'd have more of a runway there. You'd have a little bit longer term kind of guy, but I don't think you'd get as high of a level of play as you would with somebody like Paradis or Jones. It's more short term. So it's just depending on how you want to build it,
No, absolutely. A couple guys that the Bills might end up letting go. They just let go of John Feliciano. Your thoughts on him as a player, what he has left. And then Ike Bacher, another guy that's on that roster that I think dealt with some injuries last year. I'm just trying to search for guys that have some connections to Joe Shane and Brian Dable that might be guys they might want to bring in. What are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah. Boker, I think, is kind of, maybe a little bit more appealing just simply because of age, and just having a little bit more upside. Feliciano kind of is what he is right now. I mean, I think he's a limited pass blocker, pretty decent run blocker. His whole thing is he brings an edge. He's a tone setting kind of guy. Competitive toughness is very high with him. He could play center and guard. He's a nice guy to have as like a swing interior backup. I think that's his ideal situation. I mean, if he's starting for you, he's a guy you're looking to replace, I think, ideally, just to be honest. But if you want to have him to come into your building, in your offensive line room, and sort of help establish, sort of a culture and that sort of thing, and just have him as like a real high quality backup, that's like his ideal kind of situation, I think. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I see those guys.
You mentioned offensive tackle is going to be tough, and likely your long-term solution is going to come in the draft, but sometimes you want to cover yourself, right? Giants might get the 5, and the guys they don't like, and we'll talk about them, aren't on the board anymore. So when you take a look at this tackle class in free agency, any guys that maybe on a good team might be a swing tackle, but on a team like the Giants that are just trying to creep back towards average, you could stick out there for 1 year as a right tackle. He'll be solid. You can survive, and you can get him on an affordable, maybe short-term type of deal.
As a right tackle, definitely Morgan Moses.
That was a name I was thinking of too. Yeah.
Yeah, that would probably be, just looking at it, probably the top option. Maybe Riley Reef next, kind of like a stopgap right tackle. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, it's slim pickings over there at tackle. I mean, honestly, there's other guys here who I could see being high quality backups. But in terms of a guy you want to start, Trent Brown, I mean, I don't know how that contract's going to go, because I think he's clearly the most talented right tackle in this free agent class. It's just availability, in terms of reliability with him being on the field. But he's still 28 years old. And I'm telling you, when he's on the field, man, he's one of the top, I would definitely say one of the 10 best right tackles in football. He's a really good pass protector. It's just, you just don't know how many games he's going to play. So it's tough. But if you can get him at a good price, he's going to be a, really intriguing guy. So that's kind of like a wild card in there. But Moses is kind of the opposite. He doesn't have that same upside as a pass protector, but he's pretty well rounded and he's reliable. He doesn't really miss games. So I could see his value being higher for that reason. But yeah, Moses is intriguing too. He's a really big right tackle. Trent Brown's, kind of a unicorn big, but Morgan Moses is still a very like physically imposing type of right tackle who plays with pretty good control and in terms of being a pass protector as well. So, I think Moses is definitely the most valuable, probably the best value you're going to get at right tackle. There's another guy I'll throw out here who might be the most intriguing guy, and that's Joseph Noteboom from the Rams. So he's backed up pretty much every position on the line. He played left tackle last year when Whitworth didn't go, but he's played right tackle as well. He's 26, and there's something there. I think there's some upside there that's not there with Moses, that's not there with Reef, and that's not really there with Brown. And it's kind of untapped. It's a little bit more unproven. He's never been a full-time starter like those other three have. But I think Noteboom, if you're trying to take a swing on a guy in this entire class of younger guys who could potentially be more of a longer term starter, I think Noteboom might be probably the most intriguing guy.
I'll throw a couple other names at you. Bobby Massey, who started tackle for a long time for the Bears, right? And he was with the Broncos last year. And then Cornelius Lucas, who was with Washington for a while. Are those guys that panic time start at right tackle, or can you feel okay about them, or at least for a short period of time?
Yeah, I'd put them below all the names we've mentioned.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to just keep going down the list, those would probably be the next two guys I would probably say at right tackle specifically. I mean, after that, I don't know if Tyrell Crosby, I'd be kind of interested to kick the can on him and just to kick the tires on him just to see like what's there, because he had some intriguing flashes in Detroit. So that's, a guy, when you're talking 7-8 deep, in this free agent market at right tackle, he's a guy I'd be kind of interested in. But yeah, after that, I mean, Chris Hubbard is another guy who, is kind of intriguing from Cleveland, former Steeler, undersized, but he's been a really quality backup for a while. So that'd be another backup type of guy that I would look at.
Nice. All right, let's shift to the draft here, Brandon. Yeah. Who are the guys that you really have as your top offensive tackles that you believe are actual worthy of a top 10? Not just, they're top 3 because it's the third best guy, but actual quasi blue chip guys that if you're sitting there on 5 and 7 for the Giants, you feel really good about drafting those guys on the O-line in this draft.
So there's 2 for me, and that's Evan Neal and Ike Ekwonu. So, I mean, you just want me to go into both?
Yeah, you can do it quick. I don't think either guy's going to be there at 5 or 7, but we might as well humor us.
Okay, 5 or 7. I mean, if you want to talk about somebody else, I don't have him graded as a top 10 tackle, but I have him more of like a mid first. That's Charles Cross.
Yeah.
I have it's a high grade. I mean, for us, I have him as an 8.5, which is an impact player. It's a bona fide lock first round guy. It's just not top 10. But yeah, I mean, we can go into Cross a little bit. He's really, really interesting player. He's very young, which is very helpful. Former 5-star guy, top overall recruit in the state of Mississippi. So he's highly touted, all that, easy to see the talent. And you could see it on film as well. He comes from an air raid scheme at Mississippi State, which is kind of a red flag, but it's interesting with him because he was recruited in a totally different system. So, he was recruited by like Marcus Johnson, I believe, who was the offensive line coach at the time, to play in more of kind of a downhill run scheme. And then the coaching staff switched. Mike Leach came in, installed a totally different scheme, which is the air raid. And he's kind of had to adapt to that. So he's known as more of a pass protector, but he actually kind of has a little bit more, kind of nastiness, power to his game than most air raid tackles have. Because air raid, you get the kind of the label put on you that you're kind of soft. and with Cross, it's a little different because of his background. He really isn't that kind of guy. Even though his run blocking snaps are low in quantity, I think the quality is pretty high.
Okay.
When you really dig into his tape, I think he's a little further along than you would expect. But there still is questions about the air raid system. And the reason for that for me is because in the air raid, the tackles play with wider splits. And what that does is it creates tighter alignments from the pass rushers. So it's a lot easier to get your hands on a guy in pass protection when they're lined up as, say, a 5 technique, as opposed to seeing wide 9 techniques.
Sure.
And he sees wide 9s, but you have to dig into the film to find it. Right. So a lot of his reps on film are, getting his hands on a guy right away, and he makes it look easy. And if you don't really understand that he's seeing a lot of alignments that he's not going to see in the NFL, it could be kind of deceiving. So the reason why I'm saying that is because I think the adjustment to the pro game for him is going to be pretty steep in terms of what he's going to see, but I do think he has the traits to do it. So, when you isolate him on film, when you see those wide 9 reps where he really has to get out there and his range is tested, his foot quickness and all that type of stuff is tested, you can see that he's pretty good there. I think he has what it takes to be a good starter in the NFL in terms of sheer physical traits. He has the length, he has the athletic ability, he has more strength than given credit for. So I like him. He's my 3rd best tackle in the draft. I don't have him in the top 10 for some of the reasons we've mentioned, but I think he's a guy who could come in, start right away, and he has the physical traits to kind of bridge that gap between, his skill set that he's going to need, as he adjusts to the pro game. So he's very intriguing. He kind of reminds me of back in the day, like a Ryan Clady.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember him, kind of like that kind of guy, so he's interesting, man. I really do like him though. He has a lot of upsides, with the age as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the age thing because I was down at I was over at the combine in Indy. I know you were there too, right? And you look at Ike Ekwonu and you look at Evan Neal and you're like, those guys have been through a man strength program. They're gigantic. They're impressive. And then Cross, and this is not meant to be a negative, it just looks like his body's a little underdeveloped when compared to those other 2 guys. So I sense just looking at him that there might be some room to grow there a little bit physically and just refining his body, that in an NFL program there isn't as much room for guys like Ekwonu and Neal.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, from what I've heard, based on the people who are training him, he's very explosive and very powerful.
Nice.
So
he tested well.
Yeah. And just in terms of strength, stuff that isn't tested at the combine, I've heard he's, pretty powerful and strong. So, maybe just because he's only, been a starter for 2 years there, that there's a little bit more room to grow than the other guys. But, Evan Neal's the same exact age as him. So he's still very young as well. Ekwonu, I'm not exactly sure his age, but I know he's older than those 2, not by a whole lot, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely room to grow there because of his inexperience. I think he's only played around 20 games of offensive line in college. So I think it's like 21, 22, something like that. So yeah, there's, like I said, there's some upside there. There's a runway for him that is pretty long, and it's very, it's intriguing. It's enticing. It's what you want to see from a 1st round pick. He's not a finished product yet, but he is pretty far along considering how inexperienced he is. But again, there's going to be that schematic, adjustment in what he's going to see and how he has to play that, there's more of an adjustment there at the same time for him than somebody like Neal or Ekwonu, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. 2 other guys that I know some people believe might go in the 1st round. Heck, I'll throw the 3rd guy in there too. Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. I know some people think he might end up being a guard. A lot of penalties. Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa, smaller program, good at the Senior Bowl, tested great. And then Bernard Ryman, who's another kind of a raw prospect, the Austrian kid who hasn't played football very long. At what point do you start thinking about those guys, and how do you compare and contrast those guys when you look at them? And when should fans should start thinking about those guys going off the board?
So I think Penning's he's a 1st round lock. He's probably going to go in the top 20 picks. Penning to me, I'm not as high on as, that would, where he's going to go. I have like a fringe first round grade on him. So late first, early second. Same with Raymond. I have basically the same grades on both of them. I think that they both have some technical concerns that are going to, increase the variance that you're going to see for them in pass protection
Like
as
what?
a pro. So Penning, I think, plays high. His pad level's high, and his hands aren't very good right now in terms of strike timing and placement. He oftentimes is wide and high with his hands, combined with high pad level. He gets walked back in his anchor more than you would expect from a big, physically imposing, nasty, mean guy. He gets kind of pushed around a little bit. And then, in terms of just hand placement, stuff like that, he doesn't create great leverage with his hands on blocks. So that's going to be, in my opinion, I think probably exacerbated in the pro game, because that was happening on film at the FCS level in Northern Iowa.
Yeah, that's a problem.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but the thing with Penning is ideal size in terms of height, weight, arm length. He has a lot of natural power, and he's nasty, right? Competitive toughness. He's coachable. He's serious. He has the makeup to become a quality starter. I just think the distance that he has to go to get there is a little bit further than he'll get drafted, because he's going to get drafted maybe top 10. I mean,
he could be.
Yeah, he could be. And I just don't see that, in terms of instant, impact guy. But over time, I do see it. I see that pathway, being possible. Raymond is a guy who I have the same grade as Penning, but I would stack him above Penning, honestly, because I think the floor is a little higher with Raymond. And it's very interesting. Raymond's a very interesting prospect. So he is, so the negatives, I'll cover those first. So he's going to be 25-year-old rookie. So that's very old. And he has 33-inch arms. So that's about as low as you're going to get as a starting tackle in the NFL. I think there's only one or two starting tackles in the league with sub 33-inch arms. One of them's Braden Smith with the Colts. And there might be one other guy. And there's a couple with like 33 flat. Rashawn Slater last year, 33 flat. That's about as low as you're going to get. But he's kind of an anomaly at the same time. He's an absolute technician. He has elite play strength, all that kind of stuff. Raymond's not there yet. But Raymond, to me, even with those negatives in place, he's only played offensive line for 18 games in his life. So
he was a tight end before. Mm-hmm.
Tight end before. He's from Austria, served in the military. He had a very interesting background. He hasn't been playing football very long, and he hasn't been playing offensive line very long. He just transitioned to offensive line in the COVID shortened 2020 season, and he's already like pretty polished. The fact that he's picked up the position as quickly as he has, to me, is very impressive. Usually offensive line, since it's such a skill-based position, takes a lot of time to acquire those skills. He has picked it up very, very quickly. So even though he's going to be older, I think that because he's such a young player in terms of experience, and he's picked it up as quickly as he has, I think that there's a lot of room for him to get better. And the things about him that I like so much is really fluid movement skills, body control, contact balance, play strength, all those things I think you see on tape. He's a really good finisher, but the body control is really impressive with him. He's able to recover and stay attached to blocks at a very high level. And I think that translates because, in college, you want to see guys get into compromising positions and see how they recover. And Raymond recovers very nicely. So that to me is very, encouraging for his transition to the pro game. So I would favor Raymond a little bit more, although I think Penning is 100% going to go before him most likely because of the physical traits.
Sure.
But those two guys, like late first, early second, is where I see their value being the highest. Tyler Smith, I have a 3rd round grade on. I really like Tyler Smith, but obviously I don't like him as much as others. So the dichotomy or there's a stark difference between where Tyler Smith is physically and where he is technically. It's a wide gap. Physically, he has everything you could want: size, height, weight, length, power, strength, athletic ability. It's all there. But his technique is a mess, straight up. He's very raw.
All those holding penalties, right? It's rough.
I mean, the holding penalties, and just, he plays high, his hands, he carries them down by he carries his hands super low. He's wide with his hands. He's just out there like winging it. You know what I mean? And to do that at Tulsa and to get in as much trouble as he did, that doesn't bode well for an immediate impact guy.
I'm going to give you an old Sean O'Hara line. He always tells the young offensive linemen that come here, and he talks to him. He goes, "Don't be a gunslinger, man. Don't have your hands down by the hips and bring it up wide. You got to be a boxer. You can't be a gunslinger."
Yeah, he's going to have to revamp, all that. I have it in my report on him that, like, basically, and all my reports are on Bleacher Report. People can read them, but just this synopsis, this is a good synopsis of him. I said, overall, Smith has a physical traits and aggressive nature to become an eventual NFL starter. However, he is raw as sushi and a penalty machine who needs to reconfigure his technique from the ground up before he can see an NFL field. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Trey Smith coming out last year from Tennessee, who went to the Chiefs, who freaking was almost an all-pro. Now, Trey Smith was very up and down on his college film. He had a lot of health concerns as well. He won the third round, he won the sixth round. I had a third round grade on Trey Smith. I can't go higher than a third round grade on Tyler Smith, because he isn't maybe quite as powerful as Trey Smith is, but he's like the prototype. If you're building a guy on paper and, in terms of athletic ability and like natural power and nastiness, Tyler Smith is the guy. But, I just feel like he needs a year or two, and he needs to go to the right spot. So, yeah, I mean, I like Tyler Smith again, but, top of the third round, I think, is where you take a guy like that.
All right, so I'm going to put you in the Giants' shoes here before we jump to the interior guys in the draft here. If they're sitting there at 5-7, like you, they have Charles Cross and Ryman and Penning as like between 15 and 25, 15 and 28. They say, look, we're going to pick a pass rusher. We're going to pick a cornerback. We're going to feel good about it. But, now we don't have a starting right tackle, and you're getting to the middle rounds. Maybe you have a stopgap guy, but you want to pick someone that maybe can play the position well down the road. Let's take Tyler Smith out of the mix. Anyone else from this class at tackle that you like, that maybe not even that 36th pick in the second round, maybe we're talking one of their 2 picks in the third round, that you think could be a guy that either A, come in and help a little bit right away, but maybe more importantly, be someone that could be a very good developmental prospect that they can groom to be that right tackle, maybe even halfway through his first year, to start of his second year, somebody like that you happen to like maybe more than others?
So I would assume that we're going to take Daniel Falele out of this, because he's probably a second round grade.
Okay. Actually, he was going to be a guy I was going to ask you specifically. So you think he would be an all right pick in the second round? Because he fascinates the hell out of me. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, I have a second round grade on Daniel Falele. He kind of reminds me a little bit Jordan Mailata vibes. So very enticing blend of size, ease of movement, and natural power. And the thing about him that's really intriguing is he was very well coached in Minnesota. He has a lot of experience. He has over 30 starts, I believe. So the very well coached aspect of it, you could see it translate as a run blocker. So Minnesota does a lot of pro stuff with their run game. They run duo, they run inside zone, they run power, they run out, they run everything. So you get to see him execute pro concepts as a run blocker on film, which is always great. There's not a lot of projection there. So I think as a run blocker, he can kind of hang his hat on that while he cleans up some stuff as a pass protector. He's not a guy you're going to want to put on an island or anything like that in pass protection early, because he doesn't redirect very well. He moves initially well out of his stance. He gets out of his stance quickly, things like that. But if you want him to change directions against a really shifty rusher in space, it probably won't go well. It didn't go well on tape when he had to do that, and it didn't go well at the Senior Bowl when he had to do it either.
Yep.
He's very heavy. I wonder if he could lose some weight, because he's 384. He probably played last year at 400 pounds. He needs to lose some weight. He carries,
what do you think, like 355-ish playing weight, 350?
370 even, 365. Because Mailata, I think, plays around 370.
Oh, is he that heavy? I didn't realize that. Okay.
Oh yeah, he's a monster. Yeah, I mean, like Trent Brown, Orlando Brown, they all play around 360, 350. So if he can get like in the 360 through 370 even, that would, I think, help him. Because right now he can't, he's not sudden at all. He doesn't redirect well. So with him, he's really going to have to be taught to play inside out on pass rushers. And right now he tends to overset guys and open up that inside pathway for inside counters and stuff like that. He's going to have to be like drilled into to stay inside out, because if he could do that, he can blot out rushers. Because if you stay inside out on a pass rusher when you're that big and you're that long, you're such an obstacle to get around. But if you're oversetting guys, you eliminate the benefit of your size. So I think if he can learn to do that, then he could be a starter, within the first year or two of his career. And like I said, he could kind of hang his hat as a run blocker. He could be a good run blocker for you. So I have him with the second round grade because of those reasons. Another guy that I have, later in the draft, probably like, round mid to late round 3, is a guy who is intriguing to me, who kind of reminds me of Bobby Massey when he was coming out. And that's Rasheed Walker from Penn State. So with him, it's the size, the natural power, and there's pretty good body control with him as well. Now, his technique is not very good right now. He needs a lot of work there. His tape is very up and down when you watch him this past season at Penn State. He actually had a very serious knee injury that he suffered. I want to say it was against Michigan, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it was earlier, actually. It might have been Iowa. But either way, he had a pretty significant knee injury that he played the last 4 or 5 games with. So that's something to take into account. But anyway, to me, his ability to anchor naturally, to anchor well, it just seems to come naturally to him. And that's something that separates him from a guy like Nicholas Petit-Frere, who I don't like as much as Walker, because of similar technique issues. They both need a lot of work there, but I don't think there's as many physical tools to work with Petit-Frere as there is with Walker.
Yeah, Frere had some core strength issues, right, in some of those games?
Yeah, he's not very strong. He doesn't anchor well. And when your technique's not very good and you can't anchor well, I just think that there's more clutter there, I guess, for him to work through to become a starter than Walker. I think Walker has, a really nice kind of foundational set of traits to work with. And to me, in the third round for us is a high level backup / potential starter. That's where I see Walker having, pretty good value. I have him a little bit after Tyler Smith. I have Tyler Smith like top of the third round. I have Rasheed Walker like mid to late third round. So yeah, he's another guy I'd throw out there.
Interesting. All right, let's talk about the interior guys. When should you start thinking about Tyler Linderbaum, Kenyon Green, Zion Johnson in this draft if you're a team?
Yeah, Linderbaum I have him graded as, similar to like Charles Cross, lock first round pick, kind of like outside the top 10, maybe like mid first is where you're looking. I think he has a good shot of going in the late first. The weigh-in at the combine was a disappointment for him. So he weighed in 6 pounds heavier than his playing weight, which is great, but he didn't test. So we didn't see if the athletic ability would translate at a heavier weight. I'm sure he will his pro day. Hopefully he still has that mid-foot sprain that he's dealing with that kept him out of the Senior Bowl. But it was the arm length at 31 1/8 it's just, it's, to me, I'm not a big arm length guy, honestly, but there is a point to where it becomes somewhat of a concern, especially when it popped up on tape, which it did for him. There's certain matchups that he's just going to struggle with in the pro game, I think, in terms of guys being able to establish first meaningful contact on him. And, for instance, if he's trying to reach a shade in, outside zone, he's probably going to get flattened out a little bit more than you would want to see. In pass protection, guys getting inside his frame and walking him back, probably going to happen more than you would want to see. However, very good initial quickness. He's very powerful. and he's a special run blocker, in my opinion. I mean, zone run blocker.
Yeah.
He's very good on combo blocks. He's an advanced run blocker, and I think he has this power element to his game to where it's pretty crazy how much power he can generate at 290 pounds. It's pretty wild. I mean, you could even see it when he pinned Tristan Wirfs in wrestling at Iowa, or in high school was or whatever. I mean, he has a lot of power in his body, and if he could play over 295, I think he could be a really good starter. It's just, the reason why he's, I think, getting knocked down and more of a late first round pick for a lot of guys is because if a team is going to have to sort of cater to him, I think in some ways, and that's not really a top 10 pick or not, you need to kind of build in the right environment for him to maximize what he does well. But I still really like him. But my favorite guy in this draft, kind of like my guy, is Zion Johnson.
I love him.
Yeah, and that was the case back in December. I mean, I had him as OG1 then, and then, he comes out and he crushes the Senior Bowl in the combine. That just is a cherry on top. But I mean, his tape is phenomenal. He's well-rounded, doesn't really have a weakness in his game, technically sound, powerful, strong. I mean, I think he's smooth and patient in pass protection. He handles stunts and twists well. He creates movement in the run game. He has a good feel for when to overtake and release on combo and double team blocks. I mean, he's just like, I can list more strengths from his report, all these technical things, but basically he's smooth, he's strong, he's patient when he needs to be, he's polished. I compared him to Kevin Zeitler. So that was in December, when I wrote his report. I see him as being that above average starter for a decade. Maybe very good, maybe get Pro Bowl consideration, but, worst case, he's coming in and he's going to be above average for you for a long time. So that guy, to me, he's a first round pick as well. To me, I think, what the NFL will do, I think he has a chance to go in the late first, based on how well he did at the combine and all that stuff. Kenyon Green, I have a second round grade on. He's probably going to go in the first. To me, he's a little bit, his technique isn't as clean as Zion. He kind of has erratic, wide hand placement, kind of a bad habit of not always bringing his feet into contact. He kind of leans and wrestles guys rather than gets his hips underneath blocks consistently. But man, he can generate immediate movement at the point of attack. He has a big, wide body, a lot to work with there. Very young, 21 years old. But he has more stuff to clean up. I understand how some people can like him more than Zion because I could see the ceiling being a little higher there, but I would rather bet on the guy who has a higher floor with still a relatively high ceiling in Zion, more of a finished kind of product guy who can come in right away and be better. Kenyon, he just has a little bit more to clean up, but very, very intriguing guy, but I just see more of like a second round pick with him, but he's going to go in the first.
Yeah, I didn't think he moved as well. Just his movement at the combine on the field. Zion just looked so much smoother in everything that he did. I thought, at least. I'm with you. All right, final question, Brandon. I could do this all day. You're fantastic. I'm happy to have you on. Give me a couple day 2 interior guys that you like that could step in and be, be okay starters and maybe develop into something more. And then give me some deep sleepers on day 3 that you like on the inside.
Man, so my favorite area of the draft is day 2 and 3 interior. So I have a lot.
Laying on me, baby. What do you got?
I have a lot of guys here. Marquise Hayes, Ed Ingram, Jamari Sawyer, Dylan Parham. Those are all interior day 2 picks.
Do you think Parham's a center or a guard?
Center.
Okay.
But he could play guard. I don't think it's like, no guard whatsoever, like some other guys we might talk about, or like Linderbaum, who's purely center. I think Parham could play guard, but I would prefer him at center. Parham, is, if you want to talk about him a little bit, he's a really intriguing guy to me. I have just to verify here, a 7.3 grade. So on our scale, that's a high level backup potential starter, 3rd round pick. Parham, so to me, mobility on film is very impressive in terms of how he bends, how he flexes his ankles, knees, and hips. He plays really good at natural leverage. His core strength is very good. and he's able to sustain and control defenders at a very high level. And then at the Senior Bowl, seeing him take snaps, seeing some of his quickness to reach the shade and zone concepts, climb to the second level. I mean, he has a little bit more athletic ability than I think I thought. And then at the combine, he did very well and showed himself well in that regard as well. It's just he kind of has a sawed off frame, not a lot of like mass and girth to his body. So certain matchups, certain body types on the interior are probably going to be able to control him a little bit. But I still think he's very, he has a pathway that I see of becoming a starter, sooner rather than later, especially at center. So I like Parham. I mean, a guy that I'm probably higher on than most is Marquise Hayes. Didn't test great, didn't expect him to. Plays faster than his athletic ability, raw athletic ability would suggest. Tone setter, excellent competitive toughness, very good grip strength with violent, powerful hands, excellent length. So he can establish first meaningful contact on defenders a lot. The thing that I love about Marquise is he got better each year at Oklahoma, very well coached, and his mental processing is very impressive. He handles gap exchanges very well. He doesn't chase stuff. He doesn't get over aggressive, but he's a very aggressive player when he's initiated in contact. He's a very good finisher, but he knows how to temper it. He knows when to be patient. He's just one of those guys who just seems to understand how to play offensive line. His play speed is impressive, even though his athletic ability, is kind of middling. So he's one of those guys I could just see sticking for a long time and just being one of those solid starters. He kind of reminds me of Dalton Reisner for the Broncos. Ooh, okay. Not as a prospect, because Reisner played left tackle. Marquise Hayes, he's only played left guard, but as a pro. So, Reisner's a left guard in the NFL. He's a very good puller, not very athletic necessarily on tape. I think Reisner tested okay, actually, but on tape, he gets, he's just not the most athletic dude, but he's crafty and he's pretty technically sound and he's really tough and he's smart. And that's kind of how I see Marquise Hayes. I have a high third round grade on Marquise Hayes, which is going to be higher than most people, I think. Ed Ingram is another guy from LSU. He grew on me the more I watched him. He reminds me of Jonah Jackson, who is a really underrated player with the Lions. Really good puller, naturally powerful, really good patience and pass protection that is just, you don't see it a lot from college guys. He doesn't chase stuff. Like if guys are stuttering and setting him up, he's very good about being patient and square, which I really like. I think he could come in and maybe be a starter right away. So those are some like day two guys. There's a couple others as well, but if you want to go like a little bit later.
By the way, you mentioned him before. I love Salier. I think you watch him. He looks a little sloppy, right? He's not like, and that's why he probably didn't go at the combine, right? He's not like the sveltest guy, but he always stays in front of the guy that's trying to rush against him, which is kind of really what matters, right?
Yeah, I like Salier. I mean, he has snaps at all 5 positions on the line. Yeah. He was a serviceable tackle. He was decent. They protected him a lot, but when he went inside, you could see that's his home. That's where he looks like he's going to be, good as a pro. For me, I think his length is impressive. The way he uses his length, really good hands, and his play strength is above average. And if your play strength is ready to go, I think that helps you so much. Come in right away and make an impact. I think he could play right away in like a downhill run scheme or a multiple run scheme, not heavy zone. But if you're, multiple kind of, scheme, I think he could do that. And he can get you out of a pinch at tackle as well because of his experience. Salier I have with the same grade as Ed Ingram. So I see them pretty much the same. Hit them, Hayes and Parham, I have a little lower than those guys because of the size. But, Parham, they're all kind of like high, mid to low third round guys for me. Maybe if you want to reach in the late second, I could see that. Lycidas Smith is another guy I see similarly, like late third round grade. He's just like a bulldog on the interior, sawed off frame, short arms. But man, when he gets locked inside of you, the rep's over. He reminds me of Nate Davis. So another guy who gets himself into trouble by being kind of sawed off in pass protection. Guys can kind of get to his edge a little, more easily than you would ideally want. But in the run game, he's going to create displacement. And that's something that he can just kind of hang his hat on. So I like him, as kind of as a more of a like a late third round guy. Luke Godecki, the right tackle from Central Michigan, another guy who's going to kick inside as a pro. Another one who I think he has a lot of impressive traits on film. Wish we could have got to see him at the Senior Bowl. He got injured, but he's a guy I'm very intrigued by as a guard at the next level, maybe even center. In terms of day 3, though, I have a guy who I love who may go day 2 now, and that's Cam Jurgens from Nebraska.
Yeah.
Center prospect. So the weigh-in for him was huge. I moved him up a whole round he was the biggest mover out of the whole combine for me. And it's pretty much just because of the weigh-in. So he played at 290 at Nebraska, came in at 303 at the combine, and he had 33 and 3/8 arms, which was longer than I thought he would have. So there is more there physically than I thought in terms of size and length. And his athletic ability on tape is like phenomenal, elite level movement skills, and he's nasty. He kind of plays like Jensen. So I really like him, man. I don't know if he's going to sneak into day 2, but if you can get him on day 3, that's the kind of guy you bet on. Donovan West is another guy, but that's like, he's pure zone center from Arizona State. I really like him as a zone run blocker. If you want to go a little deeper, I like, I'll throw one out there, Logan Bruss from Wisconsin. So classic Wisconsin lineman, knows how to stay attached to blocks, knows how to reset and refit his hands and his hips on blocks. So he has pretty good, and I think he has pretty good body control to do that. Pretty good athlete as well. He tested much better at the combine than I expected. He played right tackle at Wisconsin, some guard. I see him as a guard only, but he has a really good build. He has a wide-bodied frame, good core strength, uses independent hands well in pass protection. It's just his foot quickness is limited on tape. Change of direction isn't great, so if he gets isolated in pass protection, you're going to see some holes in his game. But I see a guy who can come in and be a role player right away. I have a late 4th, early 5th round grade on him. So for me, that's a role player, a guy who can come in and be a quality backup with potential to start down the road. So Logan Bruss is a name that I'd file away as somebody who could start in a few years.
Perfect. I know we're going late here, Brandon. Last one, I promise. 2 guys that intrigued me. Zach Tom, who I had not watched a second of. Then I watched him just move at the combine. I'm like, holy goodness, this guy can move. Like, he's just really athletic. And then Cole Strange, I know a lot of people also like is kind of like an interior athletic lineman. What do you think of those 2 guys and where they project?
Yeah, so Cole Strange for me has a late 3rd round grade. It was early 4th, but after the combine, I moved him up to like late 3rd because he tested, like an elite athlete, and I think that just helps him. His thing is he weighed 304, I believe. That's what I think he was listed at. Either way, just when you watch him on tape, he's just kind of a smaller build guy, and he struggled at the Senior Bowl against Travis Jones and against, those bigger hulking type of power rushers.
Yeah, they walked him back a little bit in some of those drills.
Yeah. I mean, he fights his butt off. He's stronger than you would think.
Wasn't he the center where they actually did a 3rd matchup on the one-on-ones, because I think he split the first 2 and then he was talking trash to the DT and they ended up doing a third rep, I think, if I remember right.
On that one day of practice. I think they did do that. Yeah. He had some very impressive reps in one-on-ones, and then he had some where it just looked like he didn't have the size, to really hold up when guys get inside of him. But if he can really hone in his technique and, be really good with his hands and protect his chest, and kind of knock guys' hands down and, kind of incorporate all these tricks of the trade into his toolbox, he could certainly become a starter. I think those are kind of the issues with him. He kind of has an upright playing style as well, tends to lean. And I think part of that is because he's a little smaller. But the athletic ability I thought showed up on tape as well. I think he does a really nice job of running his feet on blocks and staying attached. He can steer guys in the run game. He could create some lift at the point of attack. He has a little bit of pop to his game. So I mean, I like Cole Strange. With that 3rd round grade, he kind of reminds me of, this is kind of like as old school as I'll go, but a guy named Jake Grove, who is a center prospect coming out of Virginia Tech. Very kind of similar player to me, who, I think Strange can have a better career than he did, but Strange is aced the offseason, right? Senior Bowl combine, that's going to help him. He'll probably go higher than I have him projected. But I just have a question about what his ceiling would be considering his size. But I think he definitely is a guy who could start. So I like Strange. I have him, like I said, late 3rd round. And then Tom is a guy I just watched against Florida State. That was my first exposure to him. He's the only guy that you've asked me about that I haven't wrote a scouting report on yet. So I can't speak as in depth on him as these other guys, but I did see some of those movement skills translating against Jermaine Johnson against Florida State when he was playing at left tackle. That tape was pretty impressive. I definitely saw some play strength concerns on tape with him in terms of guys just walking him back too easily.
Well, I think he's only like 295, right? Or something like that.
Yeah,
tackle. I mean, that's rough.
Yeah. And not even against Jermaine Johnson only, who Jermaine Johnson's a grown man. I mean, he's strong, but there's another guy on Florida State who's like 272. I want to say he's number 4. And he gave him some trouble as well. So, but from what I've heard, people are projecting him to play center. We'll see. I'm very interested to watch more tape on him. I have a lot of games on him to watch. So yeah, hopefully if we talk after the draft or something, I could talk a little bit more about him. But yeah, I'm planning on having his report done in the next few days.
No, that's awesome. Brandon, this was great. Tell the folks one more time where they can find your awesome work if they want to see your write-ups on all these players.
Yeah, so write-ups on these players, you can go to Bleacher Report. You can find the links and all that stuff on my profile on Twitter. So I'm going to be writing every offensive lineman in the class. I'm going to have a full scouting report on him, watch 5, 6, 7 games on him. So all that stuff will be on Bleacher Report. I'm going to also have a lot of thoughts on the class and film rooms with a lot of these guys. I'm doing one with Trevor Penning that's coming up for subscribers. I'm going to have hopefully one with Tyler Smith, a bunch of other guys I'm going to do them with, and that's at my Substack. So trenchwarfare.substack.com. That's where people can find a lot of other work that I do as well.
Brandon, again, we thank you for all the time. I know we went long. I apologize. You got a lot of work to do. And let's definitely hook up again soon. We'll talk some offensive line. And it was really informative. I'm sure the fans will really enjoy it. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me.
Brandon Thorn, thank you for joining us in the Giants Huddle podcast, everybody. Free agency begins this week. Enjoy it. We'll see you next time.